Hello, it's so good to see you again. I'm Barbara and together with Daniel I restored a historic sailing ship, Flying Coney. Last time we started our first journey with Flying Coney, and after reading your comments I think we caused a bit of confusion. Many of you congratulated us for finally finishing the project, and some were even sad that yet another project on YouTube is finished and that there will be no more videos about refitting Flying Coney. Well, nothing to worry about on this side. I can promise you we are far away from being a finished project. Flying Coney's hull is still empty and it will take us a few more years until we are finally done. In fact, right now we are planning the next big shipyard time to repair the broken frames and stringers and to get a sound hull again. But more about that later. First, let's continue our trip from Lelystad to Lemmer. And since this is our first sea trail, let's see how fast Flying Coney actually is.
So last time we finally left Lelystad, a place where we sought shelter for 2 weeks and stayed 2 years. All our boat neighbors came to help us with the mooring lines and wave goodbye. The undocking went perfectly fine. And also the lock was no issue at all. However, right after the lock, we had some issues with the engine cooling.
But it's still okay.
In really it can go all the way to 210 degrees before it overheats.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's even, that's when you need to start paying attention.
So we returned immediately to the lock to figure out what's wrong. After stopping and restarting the engine, the cooling system worked perfectly fine. So we assumed that there was an air bubble in the system that cleared itself up, or the thermostat valves just needed a bit longer to open up. And after a good breakfast, we continued our journey to Lemmer.
Getting Flying Coney ready to leave was immensely stressful. There was so much to do, and each time we finished one task, a bunch of other tasks were added to the to-do list. Refitting an 82-feet steel boat and making videos about it requires quite a lot of planning and organization. But that is quite difficult, because often things turn out different than expected. Tasks take longer, or it is impossible to find a harbor where we are allowed to stay in, or things break and we have to fix them immediately because we absolutely need them. And when things get really bad, it is important to have someone to talk about all this. Luckily, there is a platform called BetterHelp, which is also the sponsor of today's video. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who is trained to listen and give helpful and unbiased advice. First, you go to their site. You can use my link, betterhelp.com/flyingconey. You answer a few questions and BetterHelp will match you usually within 48 hours to a professional therapist. My weekly sessions really help me to handle stressful situations way better. And that helps me not only for the refit project, but also in everyday life. And if you think it can help you too, then head over to betterhelp.com/flyingconey or select Sailing Flying Coney at sign up to get a special discount of your first month of therapy. And since we finally have a reliable engine now, thanks to John, Of course, the first thing we had to do as soon as we were out on the Eiselmeer was a speed test.
We just made a speed test. The vessel topped out at 8.9 knots, which is fine. Used a little bit of fuel. No smoke coming out of the exhaust. How's the situation in the engine room?
Everything looks great. Everything in the engine room seems good. Everything seems like at a decent temperature. Water coming out of the keel cooler is a little bit warmer than it was before, so we're putting some heat into it. The charge pipe coming off the turbo was warm, so we were on boost, so that's interesting. But everything looks good.
So now going further to Lemmer. Let's put her into gear and start motoring again.
After testing our freshly serviced DAF and flying over the water with almost 9 knots, we continued our journey to Lemmer a bit slower. Flying Coney's cruising speed is around 6 knots, and for a 120-ton ship, a fuel consumption of 12 liters an hour is really reasonable.
Even though we are really happy that we can finally move Flying Coney from one place to another, actually we are still right at the beginning of the project. So let me show you what still needs to be done. As you see, the hull is completely empty, we have no running water or electricity, and we are lacking the entire rig. The next big step is to get a sound structure again, to repair the broken frames and get a new leak-free steel deck. Until that is done, we can't even start with the interior. So Flying Coney is still, and probably will be for some more years, a quite big project. However, we finally reached the point where we can move Flying Coney to another harbour. And since we never intended to stay in Lelystad or in the Netherlands, this is quite a big step for us. I hope I answered more questions than I raised. But before we continue our journey to Lemmer, could you please take a moment and hit the subscribe button? You see, we never ask for a like or a subscribe at the beginning of a video. The video just started, so how should you know if you enjoy our channel? But since you're still around, I guess you enjoy what you're watching. So could you please hit the subscribe button? It really means a lot for us. And now let's continue this journey together.
We had perfect weather for this voyage. Only at the end of the day, the wind and the waves picked up and Flying Coney started to roll slightly. She has a tendency to roll as soon as the waves are coming from the aft, even in relatively calm sea. That's because of her hull shape and has nothing to do with her ballast or stability. She's actually a quite seaworthy ship, She fished on the North Sea and had to go out even in the worst weather. A steadying sail or bilge keels would help to avoid that. And that's why she always had at least a little sailing rig, even in her fishing times or now as a motor sailor. Not for propulsion, but for comfort.
Alright, so we're about to arrive in Lemmer. The first step in our voyage to Snake. We have two possibilities for docking when it comes to docking. One's the easy one, the other one's a bit harder, but it should not be any problem. And we hope we will be able to get in the first position where we can dock on starboard, because that would be easier for us because of the prop wash of the ship. Second one is a bit tighter and would be a portside mooring, which is a bit harder because the prop wash, while putting the boat in the backward gear, would actually take us away from the dock instead of sticking us to the dock. So that's a bit harder, but anyway, we managed to do it a bit earlier and just after the lock, so there should not be any troubles with that. It should be absolutely perfect. I'm located around the bow of the ship and taking the forward line onto the bollards on the dock. With that comes also a duty of taking care that all the fenders we have are in the right position, right height, in the right position when it comes to the length of the ship. And yeah, watching everything. And of course, there's also a part where I'm telling Daniel how far away from the dock we are, with mostly signs, because we can't really hear each other from that distance. So it can get quite fun. Yeah, there's a bunch of work to do because there's a bit of skill when it comes to throwing lines. But apart from that, yeah, it's pretty cool to do. Yeah, being on the bow of the ship, I think, in my opinion, in my experience at least, that's what I kind of used to do in the port when we were working on the ship. It's where the show happened. It's where you see everything, where you arrive first. It's kind of cool, to be honest. I like that position a lot. Yeah.
Very little bit of experience on the Drachten here in Netherlands. So being on a bigger boat like this one, it's something different. A little bit of open water, like IJsselmeer is not really open water, but it's very close to it, and yeah, it has its own dangers and characters. So yeah, this was quite interesting, the combination of being outward and a little bit of inward, and the locks we had to go through. And I think we did a pretty good job as a team and with our captain.
When we pulled into the first town, you kind of feel a little bit like a pirate pulling in on a ship like Coney into a really cool old town. It's really neat to see, for me especially.
I went down to the city with a suitcase in my hand, looking for a better deal. I'm trying to find myself a plan, roaming around the streets, filling up some useless time. And if I'd seen her then and there, I would have asked her to be mine. Ooh, something to talk about. Ooh, someone to dream about.
The docking went perfectly fine and all of us enjoyed the evening in Lemmer. It is always special to arrive somewhere by boat. But all this, the journey, the videos and the whole refit project wouldn't be possible without the generous support of our lovely Patreons. So a huge thanks to all of you. Next week we continue our journey to Snake, where the wooden boat we recently rescued is located. Snake is way inland, so it will be a very interesting experience to travel with the sea ship through the Dutch inland waterways. And if you haven't seen the video about the wooden boat yet, you should definitely check it out. And that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much for watching and see you next time.